Also, I want to talk to you about the first question. Actually, I wanted to ask you. So I know you mostly for like photos and stuff, and you talked about done a lot more creative direction. I want to know what was it like, kind of like transitioning from like photos to more of a directing standpoint.
Um, it was kind of okay. To be fair,
Hmm.
for me, I can't obviously speak on anyone else's
Yeah.
experience, but it felt a lot more natural. Just because I wanted to, like, I initially wanted to go into film, because the person who made me fall in love with images in general is my film teacher from high school, Mr. Wall. Shout out,
Mm.
Mr. Wall. So I wanted to go into film, but when I got my first camera in high school, I didn't really have like people to make like short films with.
Yeah.
So I just ended up taking pictures and going downtown and doing all that. So I was by myself for quite a bit until I met more people from the photo community on Instagram and stuff like that. But even during school, we had projects where it was pretty broad and you had to kind of come up with the idea and shoot it and edit it all yourself. So it kind of instilled some value of creative direction that you had to know.
Yeah.
Even if the project was personal, you had to know what direction you were going with the project, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then I got into, I think, I don't remember which year it was, but Side Door hit me up because I was shooting for one of the founders' brothers' clothing line. And they were like, "Hey, we're looking for a photographer for our magazine. Our mutual friend said like you're a good photographer. Can we have like an interview?" Had the interview, got in as a photographer, and then I started shooting for them for like any artist they had on the mag.
Yeah.
And then over time, I realized like, hey, I'm the one making mood boards for a lot of these artists, and I'm the one setting the initial visual direction. So maybe I should give creative direction a go because it was just always in my path, and I just never took the leap of faith because in my head I'm like, oh, I'm a photographer, quote unquote,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna stick to that. But I think there was a lot more freedom in saying like, oh, I can do creative direction, not just photography, because that's another lane. Also, I was new to it, so when it comes to other great creative directors in the city, I obviously wasn't in the same league, so I had a lot to learn, which was
Yeah.
another great experience. Is like, it feels kind of your art can feel kind of dead once you feel like you know a lot of the shit, right? So like, there's that like zone where you know a lot of the technical aspects of something, but you feel like you can't make good work regardless, so you're stuck in
Mm.
that hole, right? But with creative direction, it gave me a new thing to tackle where I didn't really know that much. So I got more excited to be like, oh shit, okay. So now I'm learning about, fashion direction. Now I'm learning about set direction. Now I'm learning about how makeup and hair can affect an image, right?
Mm.
And being more specific with certain ideas and, talking to more people, not just like, because when I was a photographer, I would only talk to, I'd say like the makeup and the stylist, but now I'm talking to like the set designer. I'm talking to, if there's like a VFX going on, I'm talking to the VFX artist, right? Different stuff that you don't normally think about as a photographer, and it's really fun, man. I think it's something that like everybody has the capability of doing, and
Yeah.
it's just like a natural path as a creative, right?
Yeah. I also want to ask you if you have any advice for anybody for, I guess, transitioning from like going from basically like sticking to like only photography or videography or whatever they do, and kind of just branching out, like having like any like advice for branching out, like taking that leap. Because I know a lot of people like kind of limit themselves to like the one thing they're good at. They're sticking to
Yeah.
that and are afraid to branch out and like either similar or completely like 180 uh fields of creativity. So I want to know if there's anything that helped you kind of take that leap.
I would say, the one thing for me personally is, so I used to call myself a photographer. So when people are like, "Hey, what do you do?" Or like, when I had meetings with like managements and stuff like that, it's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're the photographer. Okay, cool." But now, the more that I think about it, I've also been watching like, I think his name is Chris Doe or something like that. He
Yeah.
has a channel on YouTube and Instagram called The Future. where he's educating freelancers and all that stuff on your brand and your identity and how you handle clients and stuff. And the one thing that he said was, you should consider yourself as a problem solver, not as a photographer or a graphic designer. Because the moment you say, hey, I can solve a creative problem, even if you don't know how to do it, like if you have that confidence to be like, I want to try something new. Yeah. So if you're a photographer and you want to try styling, for instance, right? It's just a matter of like, okay, what problems are haunting the community or the group or your photo shoots, for instance, that you don't feel like styling can be where it is. And you start doing research on it and you're like, okay, these are the different problems, and then you tackle those problems. So it could be something small, right? It could be in your own photo shoots, like, hey, why don't my clothes look as sick as like another photographer, even though it's the same clothes? Yeah. Maybe it's the combination of clothes and the color, Maybe it's the combination of the clothes and the styling, or maybe it's just the edit style. Maybe it doesn't fit your aesthetic, right? So then you have that problem within your own vicinity, and then you're like, okay, let me try to look into that problem. And then you go into looking into it, and now you learn more about styling, and now you're more aware of what's going on, and then it just slowly progresses, right? That's basically what I did. Not necessarily for styling, but for creative direction in general. There's a huge problem for me where I actually showed my portfolio at the time to my professor in school, and he was like, oh, all these shots look great, but none of them I would say trace back to you. And what he was talking about was there was no sense of identity in the shots. Yeah. They were all like really clean studio shots, right? And that kind of put something in my brain like, damn, that's a problem that I need to figure out, is a sense of direction. Like, I really need to hone in on specifically what makes my photos what they are. And honestly, for me, a lot of it led to black and white. Yeah. Even though it sounds simple, I've always loved black and white. If I could shoot black and white for the rest of my life, I would. So yeah, I kind of honed in. I think there was one year where I didn't shoot anything but black and white. And that gave me a bigger appreciation for like lighting, right? Gave me a bigger appreciation for like how to direct the models, because when it's black and white, a lot of distractions are taken out and you're just focused on whoever's in front of the camera. So it gave me, it taught me a lot more about posing the model and interacting with what's in front of the frame, right?
Yeah, kind of like more so like focusing more on the feeling rather than just the technical stuff. Like rather than focusing on like, oh, I need like this at a certain level, this at a certain level. You're more focused on how, okay, I'm taking this photo. How is it making me feel? How is it make someone else feel? How is the light gonna shine here? How is this gonna look on here?
Yeah. I have a partner. His name is Abdul. I shoot pretty much everything with him. And when he's taking pictures, I assist him. When I'm taking pictures, he assists me. And like from a personal point, like when I do my personal projects versus his personal projects, we're actually on the opposing spectrum where I'm very impulsive. So for instance, my thesis project for my school, I didn't really have anything until like 2 weeks before the final work in progress, right? Which is like 4 months. Like I didn't, because I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do. And there was like, I was just doing random shit for the sake of getting progress marks, but like I really didn't know what I was doing. And then I just, had an idea, became impulsive, and boom, I had my project. Whereas for him, he's a way more like in-depth person when it comes to his projects, right? So he's a person like thinking about, okay, if I do this project, how is it culturally relevant? What is it talking about that all the other projects with this topic haven't talked about, right? And the thing is, we kind of balance each other out. That's why we work so well together, right? Is because sometimes I just gotta tell him like, yo, bro, stop thinking so much. Fuck it, just do it. Yeah. And sometimes he's gotta tell me like, yo, slow down and think a little bit more about your project, right? So I think having that what's it called? Companionship in a creative industries where like you can balance each other out, and even though you guys have different styles of doing things, like finding a middle ground and helping each other learn is amazing, I think.
Yeah, definitely like having a good community and like support system obviously helps a lot with your creative endeavors or even creative projects. Next question I want to ask you actually is when reaching out to people like either brands, internships, whatever, um, is there anything that you think has changed, like at least over the years, has changed when you approach either a person, like a model or uh, company or whatever you're anyone you're interested in like shooting with? Is there any way you've changed your approach from for example when you graduated school to like at least now with your creative direction and doing photography, like from when you're doing just photography to also doing creative direction and photography?
Yeah, I mean, I still haven't graduated. I still got a year to go because I have
Oh,
my
okay.
electives.
Yeah.
So I took a year off, and then I'm going back to
Oh, I
finish off
see, I
my
see.
electives because I didn't want to go back right after COVID, especially because
Yeah.
I knew there'd be a lot more stuff open and a lot more work.
Yeah.
But for the question, like when I started off, at least, it was a
Mhm.
lot of reaching out through Instagram, right? Because I
Mhm.
was like, what, in high school, probably like 17, 16, 17, 18, maybe 18 years old.
Yeah.
And I was reaching out to a lot of these like Instagram models, quote unquote, right? And like
Yeah.
saying like, hey, we can do a shoot. Here's some ideas, and just doing Instagram trends. That's basically how I started, right? And
Mhm.
to be honest, I also really liked rooftoping, so I'd go rooftoping and just
Mm.
explore areas, right? But over time, I think there is like a balance of people coming to you for the work that you produce, and there's a balance of you reaching out to people because you think that you'd be a good fit, right?
Yeah.
So when you have, a certain body of work, you obviously want people to reach out to you, and that's a great thing, right? Because then they're reaching out to you for how you shoot, for your style, right? And
Mhm.
so you don't really get this feeling that you have to compromise your art, right? Because they're coming to you for a reason. But now I think there is a level of there's only so many people that you can reach out to on Instagram and stuff
Yeah.
before, you shoot with a lot of them and then you don't really have anything more to offer. So I think what I've been doing is finding new angles onto how I can be useful. So I was talking to a friend of mine, Angelica. She's
Mhm.
a house alumni, and she's a great director. And she was saying like, I was like, I was asking a question saying like, hey, how can I approach people in the bigger leagues, like for instance Lamar Taylor or Sean Brown,
Yeah.
or all these people who could give me work with like their artists and people that they're doing stuff with, right? And the one thing that she said is find a service that they need and attack that service so that they can just put you to use.
Mm.
Because my initial thing was, oh, I'm just gonna make a portfolio of all my work and send it to them,
Yeah.
and they'll, hopefully they'll recognize that I have good work and put me with their artist or whatever. But the more I thought about it, it's like these guys probably get a ridiculous amount of emails and requests. So if you
Yeah.
just have like, one short email or whatever reaching out to be like, hey, this is me. This is the service I provide. This is what I think would be useful to you. Here's my portfolio and my creative resume, and done.
Mhm.
Right? And the thing is, not every time they're going to reach out to you, but I found more success in finding something specific that a management needs or an artist needs rather than like just being like, yo, let me do a shoot for you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because there's like, I don't know, they can
There's
always
so
get
many factors.
content.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like there's so many people. And for Don Valley, it was like a friend of mine hit me up to do a cover for him, right?
Yeah.
For like a song. And then we just built a natural relationship, and he liked shooting with me and Abdul, and we liked shooting with him a lot. And then when I was on set, I was like, hey, I think creative direction is really cool. I would really like to do it. And then the next one, he's like, okay, how about you help me make a treatment for a music video? Right? So it's just
Yeah.
like also building those relationships with people you already have those relationships with, and kind of like being like, hey, here's something else I can add for you, right? Just always being of use, because
Mhm.
I over time I've kind of like, when you look back and you're like, damn, I kind of wish I didn't do that type thing.
Exactly. Regret, kind of.
Yeah, I wish like that I knew at the time to be of you, more of a use than just be an inspiration. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Is when you're sending a whole bunch of work to a whole bunch of people that you think is good, you become an inspiration rather than a service. And the thing is, that's a cool thing, right? Like, oh shit, you know, this guy just sent me a bunch of his work. It really inspires me. It looks cool. It's whatever. But if you're not really making a living out of it, then you're not really going anywhere and making more work, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge thing. Is just finding whatever you think people need and being a service for, even if it's out of your comfort zone, right?
Yeah, kind of taking steps out of your comfort zone to kind of get you in a better position with, like, you know, reaching out to people and reaching out to, like, let's say you want to work for a company, not a company, or brand, whatever, work for anybody. You kind of find what they need and you work on that specific thing, and then you can be like, hey, present it as that, and then they'd be like, oh, well, like, we actually do need that, rather than just being the photographer, the 100th photographer that sends them the portfolio, like, on Behance or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, I don't know, Instagram DMs can work. You know, my thing is just fucking do it anyways. Like, dude, I've literally messaged fucking Kanye's manager on Instagram, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just to be like, hey, I think I could add a lot to Kanye. And that's like, you know, you have those moments where like, yeah, I'm shooting my shot, you know, because you never know. You actually never know. Some people be checking their, you know, DMs and just looking at work, right? So it's just like, just reaching out as much as possible and just trying to find an angle, right? That's the biggest thing.
Yeah. All right, I think we'll wrap things up on the podcast, though. Bish, tell people where they can find you at.
My name is Bish. You can find me on Instagram at dearbish, DEARBISH. I don't really have a Facebook or Twitter, to be honest. So that's pretty much the only platform.
All right, and thank you for being on the podcast, by the way. It's a pleasure.
No problem, man. Thank you for having me.
All right, and thank you anybody who's listening currently. We are available on YouTube if you're listening on any audio platforms. And if you're watching on YouTube, we're available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. And we shall see you guys next week.
Peace.